afternoon, and evening to everyone, wherever you are. So today I will be talking about backup, restore, and archival needs in Salesforce, as well as Velocity deployments. So let's start off with backup, restore, and archival. And the first question is, why do we need to do the backup in Salesforce? Won't Salesforce keep it? It's in the cloud. So the answer to it is that Salesforce does offer a service for backup. It can cost you quite a bit, and the restore can take a few weeks. That is the SLA. So that is why you can run into all these issues that I have listed out here, which could cause you the need for a backup restore. And really, your business would not want to wait a few weeks to get their data back. And that is why you should be looking at backup solutions that can help you with much more quicker and point-in-time restores if the need arises. As we can see, it need not only be malicious intent that can cause your data to go corrupt. People can make mistakes, code can be buggy, imports can go wrong, so all sorts of reasons that can cause issues with your data and the need to recover it. Plus, of course, there could be governance and regulatory compliance needs as well. So moving on to what a Salesforce backup solution should have, and what Flowsum's solution specifically offers. So you would definitely want to make sure that you have a full backup as well as partial filter-based backups, incremental backups, all these sorts of options available to you when you are doing your backup. You should be able to do a backup on demand, ad hoc manner, just click a button, or in a scheduled manner. Similarly, for the restore, you should be able to restore from any point in time, restore only a subset of the records from a particular backup, even at the record level, maybe only a few fields, not everything. And of course, maintain your relationships, etc., between your records when doing the restore. You can do a comparison between two backups to see what has changed between the backups, and you can also use the backup to seed any other orgs. So let's say if you took a backup from production and you just refresh the sandbox and you want to put some data into it, you can certainly use it for that as well. And use it from an archiving perspective. We make sure that the solution is compliant with standards like GDPR, etc. And our supported platforms are AWS, which can also be FedRAMP enabled if you are in the federal space. And when you are doing, let's say, a restore, this can be a mass data movement or record creation, etc. And maybe you have certain automations in your Salesforce org, which are sending out emails or things like that. And you would want to disable them when you are doing the restore. So the tool does come with those capabilities as well to be able to do the restore, to both enable and disable flows, process builders, workflow rules, etc. Now, what about data security? What about the data that you are backing up? And one thing to realize with our solution is that Flowsum will never have access to your backup data, which is a bit different from other products you might find in the market. It's all owned by you. It sits in environments that are owned by you, and we don't have access to it unless you give us access. Your data is encrypted at rest. Various protocols can be used to encrypt your stored data. We can enable white listing on the backup site so that only certain IP addresses can get in, and geographical location of where your data resides can be determined with availability zones. The platform can be FedRAMP enabled. We have integration with various SSO services. We support two-factor authentication, etc., utilizing Cognito on the AWS platform currently for our user management. And finally, these are the different types of objects that we support from Salesforce, moving to your backup and storing them and then restoring as well. So without further ado, I will now jump to a quick demo of the solution itself. So I'm logged into our backup app, and as you can see, you can pretty much use this button to add whatever orgs you want to backup. And if I go into one of these orgs, that's just the time. If I go into one of these orgs, I can see the various backups that I have defined, for example, and I can see how they have been doing. I can look at logs, various details related to the backup, etc. And I can create new backups right from that screen. And as we can see, you have various backup options that you can utilize to create full backups, partial backups with filtering, etc., with template-based. And again, backups can be ad hoc, just in time. You want to run it right now, or you can set up a schedule to run them on a daily, weekly, monthly, etc., whatever your choices for your backups. So once, let's say your backups have run and you have defined them, as you are executing them, you can take a look in real time at what are the objects that are being backed up, which type of fields you have defined, if you have put any filter criteria for the type of records that you would like to back up. All that can be seen via the screen that's available. And also, once a backup is running, the various stages can be seen in terms of the number of records that are being processed and in general, what is being backed up. So as the backup goes through, we have, let's say once you have done your backup and at some point in time now you have a need that you actually need to do a restore. So from a restore perspective, again, you can select from a particular backup if you just want to restore certain types of objects or certain fields within those objects. You can define all those sort of parameters. If there's any declarative filtering you want to do in terms of only certain record types, let's say for a particular object, records with that record type should be restored. So all those sort of options are available to you when doing the restore. And as you go through the restore steps, you will see that you have the option to disable automation as well. So as I had mentioned earlier, when you are doing a particular restore, and it can be a mass restore, a lot of records getting created or updated when the restore is happening. And you might want to disable maybe certain workflows or validation rules. Maybe you have some pretty old data you are restoring and you have, let's say, added some new validation rules. So in that case, your old records which do not meet those validation rules might not go through. So you might want to disable those validation rules while you do the restore. So all these options are available to you in the restore tool. You can also do a comparison between two backups. So here, for example, I have chosen these two backups and the account records within these backups I chose to compare. And as we can see, for example, that I can see very clearly that it's the same record within two backups, and the city field has changed basically between these two records. So you can do this type of a comparative analysis also of your backups. And there are a ton of other settings in terms of being able to analyze the data in your backups, etc., which I'm sure when we have more time, we would be able to cover. And at this point in time, I will move on to the next part of our presentation, which is regarding Vlocity deployments. So Vlocity, as most of you would be aware of, was an acquisition by Salesforce probably a year or so back. It's now renamed to Salesforce Industries. And Vlocity is digital-first, purpose-built, industry-specific applications. And pretty much these are the verticals that they work with. So fairly popular set of applications for clients in these industries are running big parts of their business using these applications. And the metadata that is associated with Vlocity is significantly different from the standard metadata that is associated with Salesforce. And there is a different mechanism to, let's say, retrieve and deploy Vlocity metadata. So Flowsum will support fully your Vlocity metadata, and just get this to move. We are a certified Vlocity partner, and what that implies is that Vlocity holds us accountable and keeps us honest in terms of making sure that the tool meets the needs of any client who would want to do deployments using the tool. We work very closely with the Vlocity team to also ensure that any latest developments that they are doing get incorporated as part of our upgrades as well. And for those of you familiar with Flowsum, our point-and-click UI enables very easy retrieval and deployment of Vlocity components. So these are some of the Vlocity capabilities that are available with Flowsum. I could list all of them, but some of the main ones are you can very easily retrieve all the Vlocity data types and filter them on various options when you are doing your retrieval. You can similarly deploy them to other orgs, either on demand or in an automated manner using scheduled deployments, etc. With Flowsum's native version control, you can have version control and audit history basically for your Vlocity components as well. We also allow for conflict and merge of Vlocity components. So what that implies is if two developers working, let's say on two different features, change the same Vlocity component, then we allow them to consolidate both the versions into a single Vlocity component version and move it forward. There are some very specific Vlocity-specific commands like clean org data, etc., that the tool will also support. So clean org data just allows to clean the org data and put in some global keys into S objects which might be missing them, etc. Similarly, install Vlocity initial will put in a base install of all your data pack versions and configuration data packs, etc. into Vlocity. So let's go and take a look at how Flowsum works with Vlocity. So you will connect, for those of you who are familiar with Flowsum, this is your standard Flowsum interface. For those of you who are not, Flowsum is 100% native on Salesforce, so the interface will look pretty much like any Salesforce application that you develop. And as a release management tool, like managing standard Salesforce deployments. Similarly, for Vlocity deployments also, you will establish connections to pretty much any Vlocity org that you have. And as we can see, we have Vlocity-specific actions that you can take once you have established that connection with a Vlocity org. So a snapshot is just a mechanism of retrieving whatever Vlocity components you want to retrieve from the org that you might have been working on. And we have talked about clean org data and install Vlocity initial into the org. So all these options are available to you at the org level. And let's say if we go into that, okay, we want to retrieve some Vlocity components we have been working on. So we click on this particular button and it'll bring us to the Vlocity retrieval screen, where we can see pretty much all the data pack types that are part of Vlocity are available to us to retrieve. And we can select any, some, all data pack types to retrieve. We can retrieve based on the component name. We can give a name based on the filter criteria we give here. We can say that we want an exact match or a partial match for the components. If, let's say, I just select a couple of these data pack types and say include dependencies. So whatever other Vlocity components are there that are dependent on the components, these components that we are picking up, they will also get retrieved. And there are various other options that are available from a retrieve perspective. So once we hit the create button here, it will retrieve the components and create a snapshot very similar to this. If we go to the entire list here, we can see that all these different Vlocity types are retrieved by the snapshot. And once they are retrieved in Flowsum, I can do a commit to branch to move them into a more version controlled mechanism. As we can see that we have the version numbers here, and if you keep on adding newer and newer versions, these will keep on getting incremented, and the various versions will also be stored. You can do things like pull requests, so you can do a code review of your Vlocity components within a Flowsum branch. You can merge your Flowsum branch into another branch. And if you do that, and let's say you have a conflict, then you will get something like this, where it is telling you that there is a difference in the version of this particular OmniScript, which is a Vlocity component, sitting in the target org that I'm merging it into versus the source org. And then I can actually go to the screen where I can see both the versions side by side. So I can pretty much see the difference between the two versions. I can click on this to merge it, standard, merge, unmerge, kind of capability, jumping between the changes that you might have. All those options are available to here. Merge all option is available. You can do selective merge all only for certain types of changes. So all these options are available to you here. And let's see, once you have done your merge, etc., and you are ready to do your deployment, so you will come to this deployment screen where you can decide which org you want to do your deployment to. Again, various options that are available to you to do your deployments, separate matrix versions, etc. And you can also run just anonymous Apex post-deploy. So you can pretty much put any Apex code out here, and once your deployment is complete, the tool will run that Apex code also. So all these options are available to you as well when doing your Vlocity deployments. And once you run your deployment, you will get your metadata log records that tell you whether your deployment has succeeded. It could fail also. And as we can see here that we can do these deployments using various types of deployments. It could be an ad hoc deployment like this. It could be a scheduled deployment where you have said that, okay, this deployment needs to happen at this particular time, etc. And once we go into a specific metadata log record, we can see the details about the deployment. For example, this is the YAML file that is generated by Vlocity, giving a status of the deployment that we did through Flowsum. So here, for example, we can see that it is telling us that the deployment happened, everything was successful, there were no errors, and it actually, you can look at the YAML file that is generated by Vlocity itself. And yeah, that covers our presentation for today. And I will open up for any questions now.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mayank.
No problem.
All right, so I'm going to jump into a few questions we have. The first one is regarding data backup and recovery. Does the restore keep the relationships between the restored records?
Yes. So if, let's say, you have, for example, accounts and contacts, and you are restoring them, then whatever relationships, whatever contacts belong to whichever accounts, that will be maintained when you are doing your restore.
Okay. We have another question asking where the exported data will be stored.
So it is stored in one of the clouds that you would be selecting. Currently, we are on AWS. So it will be stored in an AWS account, which will be owned by you. And AWS, as I mentioned earlier, has FedRAMP enabled accounts, etc. So they are pretty secure. That's where it will be.
Great. And then I have another question. Can more than one backup job be specified? For example, weekly, full backup, daily, incremental, just different options like that.
Absolutely, yes, yeah. So you can have certainly different types of options for your backups running on different schedules. Or what I did not cover was you also have backup policies, data retention policies that you can define within the tool. So for example, you could say that my daily backups should only be stored, or my daily incremental backup should only be stored for a month, while my weekly backup should be stored for 6 months, and my monthly backup should be stored for a year, something like that.
Okay, awesome. Next question, how much storage is needed in backup for a certain amount of data in Salesforce?
So the ratio for your Salesforce data, I would say it depends on the kind of data we are backing up, but for Salesforce data, I think it would be between a factor of 8 to 10 less, I would say, on the storage platform will be needed. So if, let's say, you are backing up a GB of Salesforce data, it might be 100 MB or so that you would need.
Okay, awesome. And next question is regarding Vlocity. Is your Vlocity integration native in Salesforce like the rest of Flowsum?
No, Vlocity, the Vlocity CLI itself does not run within Salesforce. So the mechanism that we have from Vlocity for retrieving or doing deployments runs on outside platform on Node.js basically. So we have to do an integration with Node.js. Once it is set up, your end users will pretty much be transparent to it. It's a one-time setup that needs to happen where we integrate Flowsum with the Vlocity CLI wherever it is put up. But yeah, that integration is needed initially, and but your users don't need to go anywhere. They just need to go to Flowsum and use it from there.